Hi everybody, good evening. It is Monday, February 1st, 2016. This is one of those webinars that's not going to apply to everybody, obviously, but I think those of you who have adolescents are going to have young adults, and a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is normative, right? I'm going to talk about normal development. Even when I was preparing this webinar, I found myself relating to it as it relates to my young adult children, and even thinking recently about some of my frustrations and how some of the information that I gathered was helpful for me in thinking differently about my children. So with that, let me jump right into it. The developmental issues of young adults. This is from some research by Arnett. Talks about the idea of the age of identity explorations. The age of identity explorations is a time when young people are exploring possibilities. It occurs in two main areas. One is love, meeting and exploring relationships, and work, attending college and exploring various career possibilities. So it's definitely a time of flux. In this process, emerging adults clarify their identities by learning more about themselves and their wants. The entire stage of emerging adulthood is an opportunity for self-exploration because young people are more independent from parental control than they were as adolescents. At the same time, they have not yet fully committed to the typical commitments of young adulthood. So let's talk about some factors and stages. And again, it gives you a reference point for normal. When I was writing these, I was actually thinking some of the parents watching this might laugh because if these were the kinds of issues that they were dealing with at home or while the child was away at school, then the child wouldn't be here. I'm going to talk about the economic fact, the fact that these things are impacted by economic factors, social factors, and look at the family system. I'm going to talk specifically about an idea called the age of instability, and how it is the most self-focused age in life. Let's talk about the age of instability. This is something that was coined by Arnett that talks about this idea. The exploration and shifting choices make the stage of emerging adulthood exceptionally unstable. This instability is best illustrated by how often emerging adults move from one residence to another. While emerging adults are aware that they need a plan for the future, the plan is subject to numerous revisions. Each revision is evidence that they will have learned something new about themselves and are one step closer to identifying the kind of future they want. In emerging adulthood, instability replaces the anxiety of adolescence as a new source of disruption and stress. Maybe most profoundly for me while I was writing these slides, I was thinking to myself about how unstable it is in general. This transition, you're not a child and you're not quite a full-grown adult. And I see that both in terms of the identity anxiety and also in terms of the lack of stability, definition all around you, your task in life. It became an ingredient for empathy that I have toward the struggles that our young adults, the young adults that we treat, go through in this process. And that's what a lot of this can do, right? Even this normative stuff. And I'm going to talk about treatment issues, treatment differences. I'm going to talk about walking away from our program. I'm going to talk about how the program is different later on. But this is the foundation that can help add empathy to the equation when we watch our children struggling, as your children have at this point. Emerging adulthood is the most self-focused age of our life. There are few daily obligations and commitments to others. Most emerging adults will eventually commit to careers and relationships, but first they want to focus on personal goals and self-development. By focusing on their own lives, emerging adults develop skills for daily living, gain a better understanding of who they are and what they want, and lay the foundation for their adult lives. Self-focus will eventually lead to self-sufficiency. I think that's a nice way to end that idea, that this is what's going to happen to them, because all the way through this, even when I talk about walkers tonight, we talk about this idea of finding themselves, right? If we look at a 10,000-foot perspective on this, this is all about developing and cementing core pieces of oneself and the values. The age of in-between. There are three main markers. The three main markers of adulthood are accepting responsibility for yourself, taking over responsibilities for yourself that had previously been assumed by your parents. 2, making independent decisions, making important decisions without being influenced by your parents. And 3, becoming financially independent, no longer having your parents pay some or all of your bills. I think the thing that I thought about when I was writing these down was this idea that even in normal young adults, there are struggles in these areas, right? They have a hard time adopting them. Now, for your children, it has gotten to the level of a clinical necessity. But even when I think about my adolescents and the challenges they go through, I've always noted that raising a young adolescent who doesn't require treatment still has a lot of challenges, and young adults still are challenged by these stages, these obligations, this to step into adulthood. Although they begin to display adult characteristics at 18 or 19, they don't come into full adulthood until sometime much later. We know, and I didn't talk about the brain today, but we know that adolescence by people that study the brain is often thought of until 25, right? That they still have an adolescent or at least a partial adolescent brain until around the age of 25. Girls a little bit younger, maybe 23, 24. Boys a little bit later, like 24, 25. And so they don't have the full capacity of executive functioning, of planning, of forethought. Even the executive functioning that allows them to have more empathy for other people isn't fully developed until that time. For an emerging adult, the future is full of possibility. For the most part, no dreams have been permanently dashed, no doors completely shut, and possibilities for happiness are still abundant. The stage of emerging adulthood can be the best opportunity for substantive change. Independence, spontaneity, and wide open possibilities become less available as young adults fully embrace adulthood. That is why sometimes a deviation from this kind of lockstep march toward adulthood can be okay at this phase. Even though it's treatment, some people take a gap year, some people travel. Those things are harder to do when you get older. And so in the case of your children that come to our program, this program can be that deviation that isn't so easily accomplished later in life, right? An exploration of self. Again, they legally all chose it, oftentimes encouraged by you with some boundary that you held. All of that can happen. But I still see it as an opportunity to accomplish the thing that somebody going through quote-unquote normal development might experience by some alternative experience that they might seek for themselves. I thought this was interesting. Stages of parents coping with problem behaviors in their young adult children. I wonder how well you relate to this and how well this resonates with you. The first stage is shock. Young adults often live out of the home and may have been covering up their problem for some time. It's easier covered up. Attention. This isn't working now. What do I do with this? Action. Parents stop enabling, introduce treatment options to young adults, sometimes need to set ultimatums to attend treatment. Detachment, parental influence without control, letting go of, that's when the therapy starts to kick in. That's when your work starts to progress. Autonomy, time for the young adult to differentiate. Parents go on a vacation of sorts, metaphorical or literal even. And then connection, developing a new relationship with your adult child that is supportive without enabling. I think that's a really nice conceptualization of the stages as we see them. A lot of these were contributed to me by our young adult therapists, by the way. Here are the key differences between adolescents and young adult clients. And then I'll talk about the key differences in our programming to match these. Over 18-year-old clients have more rights and can leave the program at any time. They must sign the contract and have rights to confidentiality unless releases are signed. Information is shared with parents cautiously, as young adults are entitled to dictate what is and is not shared with their families. Young adults tend to be more entitled because of their increased rights. Therefore, holding boundaries with them in the field is a balancing act with fostering engagement at the same time. Young adults tend to be more entitled because of their increased rights. That's the same as number 2. Apologize. Parent leverage is diminishing, however. Young adults are, for the most part, financially dependent on their parents, giving parents still a great deal of leverage. They have more life experience and thus more urgency to get back on track. They generally have greater insight, maturity, and motivation to change. And now how is the program different? Supervision and structure are still high. However, there's greater autonomy. Clients are encouraged to take more of an active role, and they're more willing to take an active role in their treatment in many cases. That's probably what that should say. Staff take less of a parent-child relationship and are more peer-to-peer while still holding strong boundaries. Clients are not asked to turn in boots at night or shoes at night because there should be no run risk. Right? They can walk away anytime, and I'll talk about walking in just a moment. Restraints where a child is trying to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, that's very rare with the young adults, and it might more often happen, although it's not common, in the adolescent group. Groups are co-ed. They're not co-ed with adolescents, and they are co-ed with young adults, although sometimes the groups can be all one gender, and they can go back and forth, but we allow for co-ed in those groups. Lengths of stays tend to be slightly shorter as young adults enter treatment less resistant and ready to work. Visits from parents tend to occur more toward later stages of treatment, 3/4 of the way through versus mid-program. treatment, mid-treatment. Prior to these visits, prior to these visits can be to this time can be counterproductive for some clients, as it may foster a desire to leave the program. Parents may visit a week or two prior to departure, allowing clients to transition to the next program independently. That's a much, much more common way of doing it, and that doesn't typically happen in adolescent treatment. So you'll come out somewhere 3/4, maybe a couple of weeks before. You'll have your parent work, your family work, your reconnection, and then they will be encouraged to make the transition on their own to the next place. Sometimes with a sober companion, with a sober companion or a companion, but not with the parents. It's not often made with the parents. These are some typical patterns the young adults experience in the field, display in the field. Some adults come ready to fly, really fly, because they are ready for the change. Unlike adolescents, it may be okay if they don't struggle the same way being here. They will still be challenged physically and emotionally. Some may not hit a wall until the next phase of treatment. Many young adults enter the program willing and excited, then hit a wall the first couple of days or the first week because it wasn't what they expected. I can't stress this enough. Of course, all of you have children in the program or have been through the program already anyway, but no matter how well we try to prepare adolescents and young adults for what our program is like, it's different when you have the experience. And I think when professionals and parents try to prepare too much so that there won't be that adjustment, there won't be that wake up to this isn't what you promised, it actually makes it worse. That's been my experience. The highest risk for leaving the program is typically within the first 2 weeks. It may take them 3 weeks on average. It may take them 3 weeks on average for clients to acclimate to the program. The most significant treatment result tends to occur generally from week 5 on. These young adults often hit a wall, plateau, where they feel their work is over in the wilderness and they're ready to move on. Getting them through this plateau and continuing the process is an important milestone. I think that's true with adolescents also. The numbers actually are a little farther out, a little longer, but getting through that plateau, even experiencing that plateau, we think is an important thing. There's a very big difference with aftercare, of course, because they can choose it. And oftentimes, like I said, there is some leverage that parents exercise with money and boundaries and so forth. But there is a difference. We begin introducing young adult clients to consider aftercare planning about 3/4 of the way into their stay. Most enter treatment thinking they will be in and out in 35 days, and so it takes careful planning to prepare them gradually to take a more realistic view of change. It's important that they be involved in this process. It's better to be direct and honest about this with them. Most of the time, the young adults come around and not only accept the need for a follow-up treatment program, but even embrace it. Typically, clients are given 2 to 3 choices. That can happen with adolescents too, if the adolescents are more open. Parents will always ask me, I'll go back to this slide in a minute, but parents will always ask me with adolescents, can they have the choice? We always want to hear what they think. We always don't want to hear what their wish list is, what they value, what's important to them. That's always a part of it. And of course, the more that their wants and perceived needs are lined up with healthy things that we can all support, the more they get a say in it. But sometimes they can be given 2 to 3 choices that the parent fully endorses, and then the adolescent who's doing well can choose amongst those. And with young adults, that's typically the way it always is. And those have to be 2 or 3 choices that you literally feel comfortable with. It's not, I really want this one, I'm going to try to get that, but I can accept all of them. I might have a preference, but I'm not going to try to coerce, manipulate, steer him in one direction or another. So that's an important part of creating a healthy process around aftercare choices. Typically, clients are given 2 to 3 choices in programs to consider that parents feel comfortable with, and then are encouraged to make the final program decision. All right. We have a webinar for parents of adolescents called Runners. We call them runners when they're adolescents. We call them walkers when they're young adults. That webinar is not in the general library because we don't need everybody to see it, because it's rather uncommon. It happens, but it's rather uncommon. For young adults, the threat to walk or leave the program and actually leaving the program is actually relatively common. It happens in a group every so often. And so I thought, when we're talking about young adults, to get you ready for this now, because I think there are in these principles of everyday parenting with a young adult that apply. First of all, we view this as an opportunity to intervene, not as a walkout. Some clients just need to experience asserting their adult right to leave so they feel control. Often they return, and this can provide a powerful learning experience and shift in their treatment. The process can be used to highlight old escape patterns and the idea that wherever you go, there you are. So again, it's that idea of the future, that high wall, I like to call it, the fact that we ask them to hike out, is an opportunity to think. We'll often set up a walkabout where we'll have two staff that are walking with them. If a young adult walks out impulsively, then we make a quick assessment of what staff need to stay to keep the group safe, and then what staff can walk with them, and then we call in for backup support immediately. That's the more uncommon, although it does happen, pattern. But we see this as progress toward therapy, right? We don't panic about it. We don't feel a great deal of anxiety about it because we see it so often and we see it work out so often for their benefit. We want to make this challenging for them. We don't offer them a ride out, but we honor their request to hike out. We'll often try to buy time. Time is important. Time to process on the hike out, ask them to leave when there are staff available to hike with them, all those things. We want to get them thinking. We want to get them to pause. We want to try to get to whatever barrier that they're bumping up against, right? Oftentimes it's something emotional that if they can get unstuck, they can talk about, they're not going to want to walk out to escape. We want to set some boundaries and ask them to leave on our terms. Asking, like I said, we try to get the staff in place. Letting go and not emotionally reacting to their decision. Taking the position of not trying to convince them to stay, but rather letting them own their own choice. Embracing their resistance while letting them bear the anxiety about their situation. Strategy involved having them join the group off of Earth phase sooner and using the group to normalize their experience and help them feel connected and supported in discouraging their departure. So much of the benefit comes from their peers. So much of the, I said benefit, but so much of the support, so much of the coaching, so much of the feedback. Because many of them felt those same kind of feelings in the early phases of their program, and now they're beginning to feel a great source of inspiration and strength and healing from it. Involving parents with a satellite phone call where parents set the boundary is not offering support and not offering support should their young adult leave. So sometimes we'll set it like that. Sometimes we'll get a letter. If we have enough time, we'll get a letter out there that you'll write. Parents are coached by the therapist to let go and allow their young adult to own their own reality. So there's a different quality, right, to what we're talking about than coercing. And it's really hard because parents feel so strongly, they have felt strong enough about this intervention to support their child coming, that it's hard emotionally to let go and to set healthy and clear boundaries. Often the healthy and the clear boundaries during a walkabout, during a threatened walk, can be just enough. And when you try to engage them emotionally, when you try to emotionally influence or coerce them, it exacerbates the issue. The fire gets bigger, not smaller, in them. If clients leave the program, we have used a homeless shelter in St. George. We also have one in Bend, Oregon, giving them our contact information should they choose to return. This can offer them a dose of reality while giving them space to explore their decision. Clients who are at risk and leave against medical advice can be referred to an appropriate psychiatric hospital against their will, if necessary, if they're an immediate threat to themselves or others. And we encourage parents to set the boundary that they feel comfortable with, but not, if you provide them an option of coming home, I'll just make this as simple as possible, it's very likely they're going to take that. All right, this was written by one of our young adult therapists. In times of crisis or overwhelm, it is easy to lose focus and connectedness to the larger mission. The mission is to play a supporting role in the process of someone finding themselves, their true self, out beyond external focus factors, and an unfulfilling attachment to their personal history and subsequent limited view of themselves. The mission is to model being a safe container for each person and the group, such that clients have whatever process, make whatever choices they're going to make. Our missions are our clean and clear. That was hard to say. Our missions are our clean and clear relationships with the client. At best, all of our efforts are working in concert to create a truly safe, honest, and loving container for healing. Notice it is not mentioned that we are to change their minds, fix their patterns, or steer their ship. Mostly it is about sitting in the ship with them for a time. So that's the overall mission of it, right? And that can oftentimes be very triggering to a parent's anxiety because we want to protect them from hurt. We don't want them to make a decision that we've seen them make before that we think is going to lead to pain or some kind of failure, and so we try to control it. So we're trying to manage our anxiety in our reactiveness. All right, I thought I had more slides than that, but that was it. Guess it was. Yes. Sorry for that surprising me. I thought I had a couple more. All right, I'll take any questions that relate to the topic. Actually, there are no questions that are coming yet, so let me go over some of the announcements, and then I will take some more questions before we close up. Here are our workshops. To be clear, we want all parents during the program to come to the parent workshop at Entrada. The next one is March 13th and 14th. That's a Sunday and Monday. Contact Gail at evoketherapy.com for more info. I have the Heroic Parenting Workshop this Friday that I'm presenting in conjunction with the Adoption Network in Phoenix, Arizona. Finding You is an intensive. It is filling up. I think we might have a slot left, but it's filling up. That's February 18th through 21st. Finding You and Heroic Parenting is the same workshop. It's just that in Finding You, you can also have young adults there. So far, I think all the ones who have signed up have been parents, but it's the same curriculum. And then Heroic Journeys is for families. So that can be multi-families or one large family. Contact our admission team at that number there, or email intensives@evoketherapy.com. Parent support groups, we just did ours in LA and Bay Area. We don't have one scheduled yet. We have the New York City one. It doesn't have a date on it. I wonder what the date is. I messed that up. I apologize. Houston and Chicago are set. There are the addresses. Contact Stephanie at evoketherapy.com for more information, or to RSVP. Pursuits is our young adult trip. We want all parents to go to 6 of these meetings. Follow us on social media. The book is now available in paperback, also Audible and CD. All right. Happy to take any questions or comments. How do parents work with Evoke to find 2 to 3 aftercare options? Well, if you have a professional that you're working with, a consultant that you're working with, we may encourage you to hire a consultant, but they can do it that way. Obviously, the Evoke therapists know of some programs, so they can offer you some to research for yourself in similar situations clinically. We do like parents to work with consultants. We value that resource. I've told this many, many times, but when I had my son come to Evoke years ago, it was called Second Nature back then, I hired a consultant myself, and I'd been doing this for 10 years at the time. So we do value educational consulting. We think they add a lot to the process and can follow you all the way through. But talk to your Evoke therapist about that. And that what they do is they create a profile. What works, what doesn't, what level of functioning. They have a lot more dialogue with the young adult than they would with the adolescent earlier on in the program about things like that would be helpful for them. We went to the parent weekend. Some of the alumni mentioned that they had gone back for a week or 2 over summer. Is this Reconnect available? Yes. Let me click out of this, and then you can click back in a second, Michael. There are 2 ways to do that. One of them is this. This is a high adventure program for young adults or families, right? They can go back for a week or 2, and it's sober fun. It's run by our field staff, who are also world-class guides, high adventure guides. So it can be that. They can also come back sometimes for a refresher. They have to be in a pretty positive space, and they kind of mentor. I did that a handful of times with former clients, and so it probably happens in our program once every month or 2. It's not common in the sense that it's happening every day in every group, but it's not uncommon. So it depends on where they're at. Talk to your Evoke therapist. You can talk to an admissions counselor about that, and they can help you with that too. And then this is an option that we've just created this year. And then, of course, if they're also a young adult, they can do the Finding You, right? They come to the Finding You workshop. It's a 4-day course that can be I think it's an incredible therapy accelerator for anybody. That's why we do it. But for somebody who's been through the program, I think it could be very rich. I have had alumni come back to the Finding You workshop. So that has happened. All right, Michael tells me that that's all for this evening. I'll be talking to you about emotions on Thursday evening, February 4th at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Hope this is a helpful point of contact. Have a great couple of days, and I'll talk to you Thursday. Bye-bye.